And all of that prepared me for Maya Angelou's work. The first time that I met her, I was working for Chicago Public Radio, and I was interviewing authors. And I made it up in my mind that I would interview as many women authors as I could because their stories weren't being told. So Amy Tan, Shauna Sink Baldwin, Barbara Cartland, didn't matter to me. I wanted to interview women and help tell their stories. And then I had the opportunity to interview Maya Angelou. So I went back and I read all of the books that I could find, and I put little yellow stickies in them, and I went to her hotel with my producer and set up everything, and she came in the room and she looked at all of these books and all of these yellow stickies, and I introduced myself to her. I said, Dr. Angelou, I'm Rita Coburn Wack, and I'm here to interview you. We have an hour. And she said, we do not have an hour. We have half an hour. And I thought, how am I going to make an hour program out of a half an hour? And I think she saw the fear on my face, and she said, but for the entire time, I will be with you. And automatically, I was put at ease, and I learned my first lesson from her. Whenever you're somewhere, be present in that place for the entire time you're there. You'll use less energy up. You'll absorb more. You can see the people. You can be there. She sang, she read, she did her work, and I felt that she was with me for that entire time. And then she slipped and went into 45 minutes, and I had my hour show. I thought, yes. So that was my first time that I met her. I would know that later I would be working for Oprah Radio, and there would be hosts that we would have for Oprah and Friends. Sirius XM had done a radio show station, and they wanted to have Oprah bring all of her friends on the radio. Now, this was about 2006. And so there were so many of us. I was the only African American chosen out of about 400 resumes. And as I sat around the table, we were all discussing who was going to get who as a host. There was Dr. Oz, and there was Dr. Robin, and there were all of these people, and there was Maya Angelou. And I was just praying, Lord, can I have Maya Angelou? And then I heard the conversation around it, and they were like, when we got to Maya Angelou, they were like, we don't want her. I don't think I want to do her. She's too close to Oprah. I heard she's pretty tough. If you mess up with her, you're really in trouble. And I'm thinking, thank you, God. Thank you, God. So when it got to me, I said, oh, I'll do it. And they said, oh, great. And I was like, whew. Okay, so now I had Maya Angelou as a radio host. Oprah Winfrey, out of her generosity, said, I want you to go down to her home and record with her. She's older, so she won't have to leave her home. Go once a month, and you can get 4 stories, and she'll have a weekly show. When I got to her home, which was on Bartram Road in Winston-Salem, beautiful grounds. You come through the gate, and I'm trying to just have everything just so. And she looked at me and she said, sit down. And I've been around older Black women all my life, and so when they say something, they don't have to say a lot of things, you just do what they say. And so I sat down, and she said, now you've come in here, and you're just so, and you're all educated, and you're too, and in about a month, we're just going to be having fun. So she said that, and I embraced that, and she said, and the other thing is that you won't need a hotel. You'll stay here. Take her bags upstairs. This will be your room when you're here. When I'm in Harlem, you'll stay with me there. When I travel on the bus, you'll come with me there. And we're just going to have a good time. Her generosity of that meant that I would raid the refrigerator at 2 a.m., that she would cook, that she would sing, that President Clinton would call, that Chris Rock would stop by to do something, that Sonia Sanchez would be in the room down the hall, and that the country music singers, Montgomery Gentry, would send her a $10,000 guitar and she would take lessons and open for Martina McBride at the Grand Ole Opry. And I thought, who does this? Who has this kind of range? At the same time, I've got my headsets on, and what I'm hearing is history. I'm hearing that I'm sitting across from a woman who was born in 1928 in the Jim Crow South, who then went in the 30s to St. Louis. I had done documentaries on some of these places, and the Great Migration was happening, and it was rough and tumble in St. Louis. As she says in her own work, prostitution and gambling and things were so prevalent that I didn't think that they could be against the law. And that family that she went from was going from Mother Henderson, who was an entrepreneur who made meat pies, sold them to people at work, and then bought land, and then made a store, the Johnson store. And all of her faith was the Black woman that I knew. But then she went to St. Louis, and the rough and tumble town had birthed people like her mother and her mother's family, and they, in Guy Johnson's books, Echoes of a Distant Summer and Standing at the Scratch Line, are referred to as cut and shoot Negroes. They just soon cut and shoot you as have a conversation. And so that was a time period that she lived in. Then in 1954, to travel with the State Department at a time when if Black people or white people had the means to travel across the waters, as they said back then, if they had those means, they would go in separate planes because planes were not as reliable as they are now. But here's a woman from the Jim Crow South that by 1954 is traveling all over the world. And so I'm listening to this in my headsets, and I'm saying this is history. And then in the 60s, to have a relationship with both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X when they were pretty much opposed in their pursuit, but united in their goals. Most people were either on one side or the other, but she had bridged that gap. So I thought about all of this, and this was from 2006 to 2010. And at that point, Oprah Radio ended in 2010. I had my own company, and I did Black History Month specials. I had worked out a relationship with Oprah Radio where I could still use their studios. And so Public Radio International aired 2011, 12, and 13 Black History Month specials that I did with her, using some of the tape that we had done and then using additional work. So I continued to work with her. I got to know her. I got to know her family, and we built a certain amount of trust with one another. And at that point, I wanted to honor her life. And I really wanted to, Brooks and Dunn, the country music duo, had broken up and they were having a NBC special. And I had gone to a couple of broadcast places to find out if I could do a special with her. And I also realized at the same time that she was on oxygen and that a special would take 4 hours, and she couldn't sit for that. And as I watched her health decline, but watch her tell me when I would say, "How are you?" she would say, "I'm going from strength to strength." And I watched her attitude as she came into the room, and I thought about it, and I said, this should be a documentary. And so I said to her, "I'd like to do a documentary on your life." And she looked at me and she said, "You know I don't need another thing." And I said, this was the optimal thing. She was always teaching, so you had to learn how to recover. You were going to get a lesson. As the young people would say, she was going to check you like so much luggage at some point. You were going to get it. So if I was talking to her and the household help was where you are, and she was sitting in front of me, when I got my latest lesson, they would start to snicker. And sometimes she would hear them and say, "Making sport of Miss Wack, are you?" But it would happen. You would get checked because she was always teaching. So when she asked me, the next question was, "Do you know what you're asking?" I didn't really know. I think in retrospect, she was saying, "I've already done 7 autobiographical memoirs. I'm over 80 years old. I'm near the end of my life, and you want me to go through it all over again." That was one thing. The other thing that I think she was saying was, this is a very large story. How are you going to tell it? Do you know what you're asking to do? The other thing that I think she was saying that works into why we're all here tonight is racism is alive and well in the film industry in the United States. I get a DGA, Directors Guild Association, I get a DGA magazine every month, and I very seldom see another black female in the pages. What that means on the ground is that you're going to have to fight for every scene. You're going to have to work with people that you don't choose. You're going to have to muscle your way in, and you're going to be minimalized, marginalized, and dismissed. And you still got to get up and fight through that and make the film. You're going to have to get money. My husband likes to say, all of you English majors are going to have to learn math. I didn't realize how much I needed to learn math. I was busy trying to do a story. So after she said both of those things, "Do you know what you're asking?" The answer was no. She said, "Now, if you're going to take it all the way." And that was her encouragement, was do your best. And she would do that. She'd say, "Take it all the way." And so I embarked on, I'm going to do this documentary.